Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Master Chief, not that one, and I'm joined as always by my newest recruit, G.I. Jim. Hey there, recruit.
That's what we're going with?
Yeah, well, Matt didn't work.
No, it doesn't.
G.I. Matt?
Doesn't work. Well, here I am. I'm gonna become a warrior.
Ring the bell, Matt. Just ring the bell.
Where's my bell? Where's the bell? Give me the bell.
If I cared enough, I would put a bell sound effect in, right? But I'm not going to do that. Because I have to look up the sound effect, and then I have to listen to 6 different bells and be like, that's not quite the right bell.
Great.
We produce a quality show here.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of the show we're producing, this week, our series Deconstructing the Films of Ridley Scott continues with film number 10. We're talking about 1997's G.I. Jane, a movie that was in the news recently for completely unrelated reasons.
Uh-huh. Reasons so abstract and unrelated that we're not even going to mention them.
It's not even worth talking about. So we'll be doing a full review and discussion of G.I. Jane. And then, Matt, we've got to circle the wagons again and we got to have the MCU talk, because we've got to lecture the Marvel Cinematic Universe once again on everything it's doing wrong.
Yeah, every once in a while, we just need to get them in line and help them get their business sorted out. And
right, yeah. I mean,
they listen to us, and then things go okay, but sometimes they stray from the path.
Yeah, they're not calling, but we know they're listening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But first, let's talk all about 1997's G.I. Jane.
How am I supposed to fit in with these guys when you've got me set up as an outsider?
Move your ass up! When I want your opinion, I'll give it to you.
Did that tick you off?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
Go, get your arm! Cut her loose! Let her go! Why don't you quit, O'Neill?
Treat me the same, no better, no worse.
Damn, that girl is good.
There's a lot of people who don't want to see you finish.
I'm gonna go through with this.
I thought you'd ring out in 2 weeks. Bing, bang, it's over. I never expected you to do so damn well.
G.I. Jane. Why don't they just get it over with? Call her Joan of Arc.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A female senator succeeds in enrolling a woman into combined reconnaissance team training where everyone expects her to fail.
This movie was written by David Twohy with a story by Danielle Alexandra. It is, of course, directed by Ridley Scott and stars Demi Moore, Viggo Mortensen, and Anne Bancroft. Matt, had you seen G.I. Jane before, and what do you think of it?
I guess I hadn't. Maybe thought I'd seen it on TV at some point, but I guess I hadn't really seen it. What do I think of it? It's okay. I have a feeling that my opinion hasn't gelled yet, because it's sort of a forgettable 90s movie. It's got some okay performances. It's not great at the script level. There are some baffling camera work choices at the end of the movie that I think we'll talk about specifically. I don't have a ton of detailed thoughts right now. I have a big, messy cloud of thoughts. So it'll be fun to help sort these with you. What did you think of G.I. Jane?
Yeah, the entire time I was sitting there watching the end credits of this movie roll, I couldn't help but think of the comment you made last week, which is that you rely on this show to really help cement your opinions of these movies sometimes. And that's the way I felt about this movie, is that I just don't know. I don't think it was particularly bad. I didn't dread my time with it, but I didn't fall in love with this movie or its performances or everything that was going on there. I think it's just fine. It's just a pretty decent 90s film, steeped in 90s politics, which I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's good. Demi Moore is a very attractive woman, even completely shaved. Viggo Mortensen is delightful as always. The guy that gets super into his roles, and that always comes off on the screen somehow, that he's super into this character he's playing, because that's what it felt like watching that guy. And yeah, it was good. I didn't hate it. There's certainly much worse Ridley Scott movies on this list that we've talked about already.
Right. It falls firmly into that middle zone of like wouldn't recommend it, but that doesn't mean you disliked it. It's just okay. Yeah. No. So I think it's got a lot of distinct, different, minor problems. We could maybe go through some of them. I think the fact that it's kind of this kind of movie they don't make anymore, which is the '90s political bully pulpit movie.
Yeah.
Where the whole script is really formed around this idea of like screenwriter opens the newspaper in the morning, sees headlines related to conflict over are we going to let women in the military? They think to themselves, this is a great opportunity. And they write a whole script just premised around the idea of let's explore all of the complicated sides of this issue and the interest groups at stake and the kind of backhanded back alley politics that are happening, but also kind of humanize it. And everybody should walk out of the movie agreeing that, of course, we should let women in the military. I think.
Let's be clear. Women were in the military in combat roles in the military.
That we should let women do some vague thing that we're not allowing them to do at the time, which the movie doesn't. Yeah. So I think that like the movie, the sort of, original flaw at the foundation of the movie is the fact that it was, it is indeed this political piece of propaganda, basically, you could say. And a lot of other problems fall downstream of that one. But I think that's the main thing is it's like, it doesn't even matter where you stand on the politics. It's just, it's such a transparent political tool that it makes it hard to like take seriously as a piece of art. That's how I feel anyway. Maybe others don't feel that way.
Yeah, I don't think I feel quite as strongly as you about that, but I totally see your point. I mean, you kind of you press play on this movie, and I think you know exactly where it's going to end because of it just has to end that way because that's what the politics of the movie demand of it. Yeah, I mean, I think it is fascinatingly 90s in that like the big thing that poor Demi Moore comes up against here is an accusation that she's actually a lesbian, which is like I love the 90s military is like, well, we can like barely tolerate women, but gay women, no, absolutely not. They kind of flash at the absurdity of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where the one guy's like, no, we're not formally asking you and you don't have to tell us, but this is just an informal inquiry. Yeah. And I'm like, what are we fucking doing here?
We're just going to suspend you until.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
No, I just found that whole plot line hilarious because like, obviously they needed like a beginning of the third act drama to like remove her from training because they just like they needed some political maneuvering to happen at some point in the whole thing. So they invented this like, oh, she goes to the beach with some girlfriends and they hug, and so that those pictures are now being used to call her gay. And I'm just like, yeah, women hugging each when they're friends, that totally like gay. It's just absurd.
Yeah, it's like a side hug. Yeah.
Yeah, like the picture. You're right. Like the activities in the pictures were like the most straight women things like that have ever happened. Like they're just like hanging out next to each other on the beach. That's like, oh, she's gonna embarrass the Navy because she's super gay. Yeah, it's just very, very silly.
Yeah, it's all very okay. So, I just came out swinging kind of, and I do want to say like it does have a good human story at the heart of it. Like I think Demi Moore is good in this movie. I think her character is well drawn. You sort of buy the escalation where they kind of railroad her into this situation, but then once she's in the situation, you understand that like she's just someone who doesn't back down from a challenge. And so at a certain point, even though she didn't choose this, she's going to see it through no matter what. And I really bought all of that. Like in that sense, actually, the movie succeeds in what it's trying to do. It gets you to buy into the idea of this character as this perfect, warrior and who wins over all of the men in the unit and and they accept her, and like all of that worked on me. So when I'm critical, it's like the premise itself is kind of goofy. It's kind of a goofy 90s premise. The execution is actually good.
Mhm.
Not great, but good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with you mostly. I think the character that Demi Moore is playing, Jordan O'Neill, gets a bit lost in the politics of the movie, which I think is perfect because I think the story here gets a bit lost in the politics of making the movie a little bit. That like obviously like there's two different stories going on here. There's a woman passing this training is important for certain political parties, and then Jordan O'Neill passing this training is important for her personally because she, is frustrated that the only way to really make it up the ladder in the Navy is through combat ops training, like that type of stuff. Like if you're not in actual operations, you're just not going to climb the ladder. She's frustrated with it. She doesn't like it. Here's her opportunity. I think it is a really interesting choice. You're absolutely right that like she didn't really want to be a Navy SEAL. Like she sees this as an opportunity to advance her career, and so she accepts it. But like it's not like she dreamed since she was a little girl of being a SEAL, and then the men told her she couldn't do that, and then along comes an opportunity to do it, right? I think that's one way you would kind of maybe expect the movie to go, and it doesn't go that way. And I think that does add a little bit of complication to it because, yeah, like not only is she struggling with the absolutely brutal training that she's going through, but like the question of how much do you actually want this? And I think for her, it becomes less about wanting it and more about proving that she can get it.
Yeah.
And so like, I think she says, every time one of you guys tells me I can't, like, it just makes me want it even more. Which is, I think, exactly what's happening. And I find that really, really makes her a much more interesting character than just like, this is a girl whose dad was a Navy SEAL or something and always dreamed of being a Navy SEAL and no one told her she could. And I don't know. I think that's much less interesting than steeping this in her own internal struggles as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. I guess I agree with you, but at the same time, the movie does become a bit muddy and overcomplicated, which I kind of want to say is a theme of these Ridley Scott movies we've been covering lately.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is the fact the movie's like 2 hours and 10 minutes, basically.
Yeah.
Which I think we were joking earlier that Ridley Scott loves to make movies that are just a bit too long.
Yeah, they all feel they're like exactly 2 hours and five and a half, 6 minutes for some reason. Like I really feel like White Squall was like exactly 2 hours and 5 minutes, and then I boot this movie up and it's that again. And I'm like, and yeah, like if you look at the structure of this movie, it's she goes to SEAL training. It's really, really hard. They do the third act. Training's over, kids. Time for real fight. And then the movie ends, and you're like, how did that take 120 minutes to do all that? I think it really gets a little, I'm not going to say bogged down, but he gets I think the thing that fascinated him most about this whole thing is the training itself. Like, I think someone probably told him the story of what Buds is like, and he became really fascinated with it because the same things happened to me. I don't remember exactly when it was, but we had some organization I was in, we had a Navy SEAL come and talk to us, and they like went through in excruciating detail what Buds is actually like. And it's awful. Like, if anything, the movie makes it look nicer than it is.
Right. Well, the thing about Buds, as far as I understand, is like it's not really training so much as torture. It's just designed to get you to quit.
Yeah. And
then once they've made a certain number of people quit, then they say, all right, those of you who are left have above average mental toughness, and now we're going to actually train you to be SEALs.
Yeah.
But the mental toughness component is what they're filtering for.
Sure.
I'm simplifying a bit, but this is my understanding. And yeah, like you said, I think Ridley he definitely focuses on showing kind of the visual spectacle of this training and how dramatic it is, and how flashing lights and rain and mud and cold and
Yeah.
water and just it really visually dynamic. Like I think that's kind of the most visually fun part of the movie.
Yeah, and you almost like lose Demi Moore in it a bit, like,
Mhm.
and I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. Like, I think it's just like you get so like swept up in all these people going through this training that like you forget that this is a movie specifically about her, and you're just kind of swept up in the, oh my god, look at all these poor suffering people. Which one of them is going to give up next? I found, it's the majority of the movie really, and perhaps it goes on for too long, but I found it really, really fascinating just to see how Ridley attempted to translate what this thing must be like to the screen. I think he did a really good job.
Yeah. I think in terms of so in this movie and probably other movies we've talked about the last few episodes of this sequence, one big problem is just like extraneous plot threads that should have been trimmed,
Mm-hmm.
or shortened. I don't know. Okay, so I'm kind of of two minds of this, but the senator who gets her into this pickle in the first place,
Yeah, the one that Anne Bancroft is playing.
and Bancroft, kind of an interesting whole choice there.
Yeah.
To emphasize that part of the story so much, and then to go back to the senator later and bring in this thread of like the politicking and everything. Like it really kind of saps the momentum out of the Demi Moore is training to be a Navy SEAL plotline, and totally it really takes the wind out of your sails. It's almost narratively interrupting you in the middle of what feels like a very meaningful plot beat, where you're like mid stride into like the next act, and then it's like, nope, gonna yank her away to do this political argument for 15 minutes, and then like she goes back, and there's no real consequence of that.
Yeah.
It just and like that's a perfect example of just a thing where it's like you bled away the tension and the momentum. It was much less like actually interesting than what we had been watching. I'm kind of confused about what we're doing with it anyway. Like in the first place, at the thematic level, I don't understand what we're doing. And then we get back to it, and it didn't even matter plot wise. And that's the kind of thing where I kind of feel like that happens a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be as charitable to the movie as possible, I think what it's trying to do with the whole senator character is kind of show that, like, demonstrate the length at which everyone is against her, right? So like, like there's a lot of taking sides going on here, right? And like as we're being introduced to the men of the Navy, and like they all kind of suck, right? Like we're introduced to the Scott Wilson who plays the CO that she meets at the very beginning, and he's like being nice to her at first. And then the second she starts being successful, he like turns into a total fucking asshole. And like all the men are just like shitty to her constantly throughout this. And we have this Anne Bancroft character who is like sponsoring her and trying to get change and trying to have the military change the way it views all this stuff. And then I think the revelation that no, this is all just politics for her as well. She doesn't actually care about women in the military as like a principled like equality stance. It's just politicking. It's just trying to win votes, trying to win elections. That's it. And the second she realizes it's not going to win, she completely reverses, abandons our G.I. Jane, and goes the other way, and they have to discover it. So, I mean, I think just like showing the depth of which people aren't on your side, even women, I think one thing that was true in this movie, there's not too many women in it. The one other woman that's in it is the nurse that she's accused of having a lesbian affair with, because they hang out once publicly surrounded by other people. But so the only other woman is the senator, and she betrayed her too. She doesn't have her back too. So I think this is like, we're not even like dividing on gender lines here. It's like no one wants her to win this thing. Nobody does.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're not wrong, of course. I think it's just, for me, it's a matter of being efficient with your screen time.
Yeah.
And I again, yes, absolutely right that this straight out of sort of the screenwriting playbook is just like pile on the characters, make everything worse, amplify the tension by amplifying the obstacles. And, like you said, even the people who we thought were on her side are actually not on her side and are throwing her under the bus. In principle, it's actually good screenwriting. In execution, it's extremely slow.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with it is actually how it's resolved, and I think you're entirely right. It's kind of just resolved. I mean, what it is it's a chance for O'Neill to show her quality again, right? Is for her to show how good at this whole thing she is. That not only is she, kicking ass in the PT and mental toughness areas, but she's a very intelligent, savvy politician as well, who can manipulate people to get what she wants. And it's like, I get why the movie would want to do that. I just don't think it needed, I don't think we needed to know that about Jordan. I think at that point in the movie, we were already like, oh, this woman's awesome. She's mentally tough. She doesn't give up. She's absolutely strong-willed and strong-headed. She's gonna go to the end. By that point, we had been entirely convinced of it. So I don't think we needed a scene where we go, oh, also look at her being a master politician. I just don't think we needed that. That's not necessary to her character, I think, to be like, oh, also she's really good at this thing too, and she's going to manipulate a senator into getting what she wants. It just didn't add anything to the film, I think.
I think maybe my problem is with the whole ending, actually, because I mean, yeah, I agree with you there, but then also once she goes back to the group, that's after they've had the event, basically, where Viggo decides that actually it's it's the men who are wrong and they need to give her a chance, right?
Yes, it's after the torture sequence,
right. Yeah. And so then she goes back, and then as far I'm kind of refiguring some things out as we're talking. I guess as far as I'm concerned, the plot is resolved at that point. As soon as Viggo says it's us who are wrong, it's like, bam, dramatic arc ended. And then they lay on the senator betrays her. And then they tack on the entire, okay, now the combat has to get real sequence, because that's how all of this genre of movie end, is the trainees have to go actually fight in a war for some contrived reason.
Can we talk about that? Why is this the trope? And honestly, when I was watching this movie, and I had seen this before, but it's been a while, so I didn't remember it, I thought, in my mind, that's just them manipulating them into making it feel like this thing they're about to go on is to just mess with their head and make them think they might be going into a real combat situation. I was like, oh, they're just messing with them. It's not going to be a real combat sequence. It's this movie is so, I think, down to earth and real in a lot of what it does that seems so extraordinary. I don't know. I've not been in the military, but I do not believe the military would ever be like, you ungraduated class, you're up now, go to real combat. I just don't believe it. And so many of these films do this. I mean, Top Gun, of course, did it. Or actually, did they graduate Top Gun before they might have graduated? Top Gun might have actually done it right. But
well, I mean, they might have just graduated.
Yeah.
But I think the point remains that it's like you always have to take the trainees and throw them into a real combat situation at the end of the movie, which I actually think in both this movie and in Top Gun, it's like this isn't the proper conclusion for this film, because the arc of her character isn't is she going to be enough of a badass to fight the bad guys? It's, are the men going to accept her? And that already happened.
Mm-hmm.
We already got that beat.
Yeah, so I'll play a little bit devil's advocate here. I think you're right with the men in her training group. I think they all have accepted it and respect and like her. I actually, when I think about what Viggo said in that scene, I think he wasn't saying we're the problem and we need to fix ourselves. I think in my mind what he was saying is, she's not the problem, we're the problem, and that's why this is never going to work.
Mm-hmm.
like a woman can try as hard as she can and do everything right, and we are the ones that are a problem. We are treating her differently. We are gonna fold in an interrogation when it's a woman being tortured over when it's a man being tortured, or even like when my supporting officer who would have helped me beat the shit out of this dude is not going to help me beat the shit out of this girl. And so I didn't read that as like him saying like, yes, we should allow this to happen. I read that him saying like maybe he's refocused what he believes the problem is, but I think he ultimately still thinks this is a bad idea, and he respects her certainly, but it doesn't matter. He concludes it's like, okay, she's won me over, but it won't matter. There's too many men out there that are never gonna see her the way we see her, and so it's not gonna work. So so in my mind, the third act then is kind of taking his doubt even still and putting it in a real life combat situation where, of course, she saves his life and does everything perfectly, and then I for a second there, I thought they were gonna channel the one sequence where he says, "Could you pull a 240-pound person out of a burning car and lift him over your head and walk him to safety?" And I was like, "Oh, are they gonna contrive this where that's exactly what she has to do?" But that's not actually what she does. She just kind of pulls him and then stands him up and then helps him walk. So I was like, I was like, is Demi Moore really going to carry Viggo Mortensen on her back? I don't actually know if she could do that, but
you know,
no, I mean, I kind of agree with you that like it seems like the way that I don't know. Here's my big problem with the movie. I think everyone in her unit is not characterized enough. I think they're very, very lightly characterized archetypes. And then the one we spend the most amount of time characterizing is the Master Chief, is Viggo. And I think that's a mistake, because I think this should be a movie about the unit and the men in the unit and her, like watching them kind of come over to her side. And you can tell like Ridley kind of tried to do that. But like, Matt, tell me the name of one person in her unit.
Jim Caviezel.
Okay. What was his character's name?
No idea.
Yeah, there you go. Like, none of these people are very memorable. Like, I mean, they're there. Like, I can tell you, like, I remember the black guy specifically because he gives a speech about how, you know, his father wanted to be a gunner on a Navy ship in World War II, and they wouldn't let him because he's black. And so he relates to what she's struggling with because he and his family have struggled with it too. But I don't like outside of that, you know, who is he? What does he want? None of these characters. Jim Caviezel is just kind of playing the weird one that hates her and then is kind of won over in the end. And yeah. I just don't remember a lot about the men in her unit. And so the moment where they kind of, you know, rally around her just doesn't land as hard as it should, because it's actually about her convincing Master Chief. It's a battle of wills between Viggo Mortensen and Demi Moore is what the movie is. And I just think that's the wrong tactic to take with this type of story, that like what you want the unit story. You want the band of brothers / sisters, I guess, story. Right.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And, you know, okay, so I agree with your devil's advocate kind of explanation of why they chose to end the movie that way. But I don't think it was dramatized. Like, I agree that was the intent. The intent was exactly what you said, that we needed to, create a persuasive case, not just that, you know, it's the men that are the problem, but that she's actually going to be such a badass that she's going to prove that she can be just as good as a man, you know. It's just like, I don't feel like that was dramatized. I use the word dramatized a lot on this podcast, and I don't know that I've ever really defined it. What I mean when I say dramatized is it wasn't conveyed at the dramatic level of emotion and feeling and believing that like the characters were experiencing these internal states and internal changes. It looks good on paper, like it's like the mechanics of like the why makes sense, but the feeling of like, oh yeah, that I felt that when it happened, that was totally absent. And
why did Jim Caviezel decide that he liked her now?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, That's what I mean when I say dramatized versus, attempted but failed. It's like I didn't feel that. Now it's not that I felt nothing. Remember, I felt Demi Moore, O'Neill. I felt her struggle. I felt her frustration and her triumph when they finally start to accept her. She's the protagonist. She's a good actress. They spend a lot of time with her. They develop her properly. I felt all of that, I'm pretty sure, pretty much as intended. But like none of the other surrounding stuff that we're talking about was really dramatized.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. Yeah, I mean, like, again, the ending would have worked if we knew any of these people more, a little bit more.
Yeah, right. Like they're on the beach at the end and they're like debating what to do, and you're like,
which one are you?
Are these people I'm supposed to remember from training, or are these like other guys? Like seriously, like I basically remember Jim Caviezel is, like you said, the weird guy, and then there's like the guy with kind of the blocky face, who keeps telling her to give up on her dreams, and that the wrong kid died. And what? Who else is there? Like,
I mean, there's it feels so insensitive to say that there's the black one, but like there's one black guy in training, and that's the 90s, so you got to get your one black guy.
I mean, yes, because that's the only thing that he talks about either is the fact that he's black, which is it's like, this is not super deep.
I think the one that you're talking about was named Cortez. He's one of the two, like him and Jim Caviezel are the two that don't listen to her orders and go crawling towards the thing, which again is one of those weird, like, so they don't listen to her orders. They go crawling towards the hut and they get captured. But like, from our understanding, the whole point of the exercise was for them all to get captured to go through torture training. Like that's the whole point of the thing. So again, like people not listening to Demi Moore and following her orders and not taking her seriously because she's a woman doesn't have any actual effect on the plot. Like it doesn't do anything. Like that's the one instance where they disobeyed, and it seems like because of that, therefore torture training. But no, it was always going to be torture training. This is the point of their training where they go through torture training. So I don't know. It's just, it's not that like, it's not like it doesn't do these things. It's just, I think you're right. It just doesn't stick the landing on a lot of these things.
Yes. I agree. I think some of that is screenplay, script. I think some of that is direction. Can I talk about my least favorite direction thing in the whole movie now?
Sure.
Since apparently I'm being way more negative than I even anticipated being. What the hell's going on with the camera during the final firefight when they're trying to rescue Vigo?
So I didn't notice this. So explain what you mean to me.
So like whenever somebody's shooting guns, the camera is like doing this horribly distracting thing where it like, imagine you have your finger on the zoom button and you're just flicking it up and down rapidly. And it's like jerking. So basically jerking the I've never seen it in any other movie, so I don't even have like a reference to compare it to, but it's like the screen is jittering, except instead of like side to side, like I guess normally what you expect is if you're trying to convey like chaos and explosions and machine gun fire, you can have some level of like side to side rocking of the camera, but this was like in and out rocking, where it was like the screen was pulsing really rapidly, and it looked stupid and terrible.
Interesting.
And it was a bad idea, and I'm glad that nobody else ever tried to do it. It was by far the worst single thing in the movie. And I'm not sure if at this point I'm wondering if we saw different cuts of the movie, because if you didn't notice it,
I didn't notice it,
okay.
But I mean, part of me wonders. The thing I did notice is that I felt, the one refrain we've had throughout the last few weeks is, even when we don't like the movies, we're just like, oh, but Ridley Scott's camera. holy shit, Ridley Scott's camera, so good. I love what he's doing. I love how beautiful he's making these movies, and the script doesn't work, and so the movie's not that good. But this movie, I was thinking that until we got to the entire last action set piece. So maybe I'm not remembering that specific camera move, but I'm remembering the flat, uninteresting way the entire last sequence is shot. And like, I don't want to do the thing where, well, if this is bad and it's by a director I love, it must not be him who did it. But I would not be surprised at all if you told me that the entire action sequence was shot by a second unit director. I would not be surprised at all, because it's just like, outside of the thing you were describing, I just think it's dull and uninteresting, and the geography of it never lines up to me. I never like. I just thought the whole sequence was really weird. Like there's not like a lot of establishing of like, here's where the thing we're trying to get is, here's where the bad guys are here. Like, there's a lot of weirdness in all that. I just think the geography of the whole sequence is a little bit weird. It's shot kind of lame. The action is not good. It's not entertaining. Demi Moore did such a good job in this movie at looking like a total badass who I'm believing is like fucking doing all these push-ups and doing these pull-ups. I think the pull-up sequence is one of the most iconic sequences from this movie, right? Or struggling to do that pull-up and doing it. She's doing so great. She looks so great. And then at the fucking end of this movie, she runs out with her gun and opens fire on the Libyans. And I'm like, that looks like Demi Moore doesn't really know how to shoot a gun very well. Like, it's just like, and I don't think I don't even want to blame her. I just think that the setting of the sequence, like, she just runs out of cover into the middle of the area with the gun kind of at her hip and opens fire, and I'm just like, no Navy SEAL would ever behave that way ever. Like, I don't know. Like, I felt like we went into a different movie in this final action sequence. We were in a different movie, and it's much more lame movie.
Yeah, I agree with everything, especially the geography. The sense of distance between the pursuers and Vigo and just everything. And I think that the amount of, setting aside the ridiculous camera thing they were doing, the camera in general is just shaking all over the place in a way that's extremely disorienting and distracting and bad. And yeah, no, didn't feel like Ridley. I would almost bet money that it wasn't. Compare this against, Gladiator for one thing, but really any other action sequence that I can think of in any of his movies has always felt like beautifully cohesive. That was the whole, it's like the whole great thing about Ridley is action scenes are like the pinnacle of his movies. He's good at kind of the beauty of kind of capturing the beauty of a set piece, but also just like the magnificence of his action scenes is usually the peak. And there was none of that here, and there was even the opportunity for it, right? Because you're in this kind of intrinsically beautiful desert landscape with these canyons and such. Like, that could have been a cool sequence, but it ended up being ugly and boring and confusing.
It felt rushed. It felt like they were in like the California desert and needed to make it look like Libya and didn't really want to do a lot of work to do that. It just didn't look good. And looking at this, because I was curious, the director of photography on this is a man named Hugh Johnson, who also did White Squall, a movie that I think we both thought was beautifully shot. And putting your problems with it aside, I think it was a very good looking movie. And I think for the most part, I think this is a very good looking movie. Like all of the photography of the Buds training, I think, is fantastically done. And I think this is the part of the story that interested Ridley Scott. I don't think the third act interested him at all. I don't think that was the type of movie he wants to make. And it's not like he doesn't know how to shoot war scenes, right? We're going to be talking about Black Hawk Down in a few weeks, a movie that is like one constant war scene that if I'm remembering correctly, one of the most wonderful things about that is the way he shoots that film. you're so intimate and in there with the soldiers trapped that you just feel it the whole time. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah, you're
I
right.
don't know. I'm it's so weird. So I think it's, I don't want to assign like indifference to a director when I don't know, but it just feels like this is the part of the movie that we needed to get through because everyone expects it to have this. And so we need to do it. And I don't think it didn't feel like Ridley was really into it.
No. I mean, God, the intro sequence of Gladiator is one of my favorite things ever put to film.
Mm-hmm.
and it's a battle scene, right? Like like it's not even the same league,
No.
There's one meta comment just about the evolution. I think I don't know if this is true or not, but this feels like one of the longest stretches of a career that we've looked at, and it's going to go on another 20 plus years past this point, but we've already looked at between 1977 and 1997.
Mm-hmm.
The Duelist was 1977. G.I. Jane was 1997. That's already 20 years of,
God, yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. Yeah.
and it's kind of fun to think about because you can feel the changes in how movies are being made happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a million little things, some of which I think we've probably articulated as we've gone through the movies, but just many details about the look, and also even down to like the way the actors act. I think like there's sort of a different main schools of thought in terms of like what good acting looks like.
Yeah.
As we move into the 90s, it kind of looks very different than it did in the 70s. The 70s were almost this mumbly, reserved acting style was dominant. The 90s, it's all much more like clear and sort of caricatured, you could say.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And I think it'll just be interesting to pay attention to this as we go onward, because this isn't something I think about a ton, but we all kind of have an implicit understanding of this. And, we're going to go all the way through the aughts and the 2010s. And we're going to end in the 2020s. Right. And so we're going to be able to notice all these things as they're happening. And it's just kind of interesting to see all these things refracted through the specific lens of Ridley Scott and the choices that he's making and where he's choosing to use the tools of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think this is a good time to at least talk about that. Like one of the big through lines of his career has obviously been, investigating women, and dealing with men, like women in men's spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's been a thing he's looked at quite a bit. It's something he's obviously very interested in, and he's interested in the women and how they react to it, but he's also very interested in the men's reaction to all this stuff and how they are processing it. And I mean, I think this is going to continue on as we go on, but I think this is probably the clearest example of that particular type of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. It's roughly half of the movies up to this point have either dealt with male-female relationships, with an eye toward the female side of things, or the disadvantaged position of women. And I mean, even something like White Squall, where it's specifically about these boys, there's some amount of attention paid to like gender dynamics. It's just something he pays a lot of attention to. I agree.
Yeah.
It's a big special interest area of his.
It's interesting. I kind of want to talk about Demi Moore a bit here too, because this was an interesting choice for her to do. In 1996 she makes Striptease, and then a year later she makes this movie. And I do think, talking about the 90s, I think this movie hurt her career. I think this movie hurt her career because she shaved her head and she was this like incredibly tough, like, I don't want to say masculine because that's not exactly right, but she was this kind of sex object up until this point, and then she kind of intentionally tried to go away from that. And I don't know, like, she's in movies after this, of course, she's always been working constant, but like I feel like she was a movie star at this point in her career, and I don't know if she ever got back there again.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know anything about Demi Moore's career, to be frank. I mean, she was in his next, not his next movie, but a couple movies down the line, right? Isn't she in Hannibal? Am I thinking of someone else?
She's not in Hannibal.
She's not in Hannibal. Okay, no, then okay, that was just a brain fart. Yeah, I mean, maybe, Demi Moore has 3 kids, and at a certain point, an actress who is known for her looks, particularly when she is pregnant, she's not going to be cast in a lot of roles because of that whole different flavor of sexism.
Yeah,
that could be one aspect of why her career floundered at a certain point as well.
And maybe I'm prescribing sexism to something that wasn't actually there at the time, but I do feel that, like, when you look at the arc of her career, it's not like this is like a big breakout moment for her either. I think there was a lot of negative reaction to kind of her almost explicitly via this movie kind of saying, I don't necessarily want to be a sex object, although she just does still get super naked in this movie. Shaved head or not, she's incredibly beautiful woman, right? Which is so, but the 90s were a shitty time.
Yeah.
They were a great time, but they were also a shitty time in a lot of instances. And I can see this being like, oh, she's not beautiful anymore. And so I don't know, like, I look at her career from here on, and like, obviously she was, in stuff, but like, there's nothing on here that goes, oh, that was a big movie, that was a huge movie, that was a huge movie. Like, there's nothing.
Yeah, it seems like in the mid 90s, I'm looking at her Wikipedia right now, and it just seems like in the mid 90s she just did a string of total bombs that were, well, either bombs or movies that did well financially but got totally panned. And then at a certain point, I think she decided to kind of tap out and focus on her family. And then I think she came back again later, but not in nearly as big of a way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she was also in a very specific kind of movie, right? Like, she was in Indecent Proposal, she was in Disclosure, she was in The Scarlet Letter, she was in Striptease. Like, she is definitely like leaning into the kind of sex symbol type thing, which, I mean, you don't necessarily prescribe that to her, right? That's the industry she's in, and if that's what she's getting cast in, that's what she's being cast in. But I do think this feels like a very specific, like, she's trying to make a point, and she's trying to take the reins of her career a little bit and do something that was unexpected of her. I do very distinctly remember, like, the pop cultural shock at learning that Demi Moore shaved her head. That's like, she shaved her hair off. Like, that was a big shocking moment in the 90s.
Yeah, it does seem like the kind of choice she might have taken on as a way of attempting to redefine her career as someone interested in more serious roles.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think we have enough knowledge about this to conclude on it definitively, but interesting to think about, at least.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I thought she was great in this. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that I don't know. So it seems that was not a widely held opinion at the time. Like, I didn't have any complaints about her performance. Yeah,
I don't understand that. So I could have sworn to you that this movie was nominated for awards. Like, that, it didn't do that good financially, but definitely nominated for some awards. Maybe for acting, maybe for, maybe not directing, but no, nothing. The only awards the thing that is nominated for is the Razzies, in which she won Worst Actress
of the year.
Of the year. Fuck you, the Razzies. There's no way. I was alive in 1970 or 1997. I saw a lot of movies that year. There's no way this was the worst performance of that year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe
it's a good performance. Like, it's not like stupendous, but it's like, it's really good.
She gives a good performance. I liked Viggo's performance. Everyone else is serviceable. The performances are not the problem. The plot structure is the problem. Yeah. I think this is just an example of critics not knowing anything. And
Well, I don't know who votes on the Razzies.
Yeah.
I don't. I hate worst of lists. By the way, it's
Yeah.
just a shitty thing to do.
yeah, me too. It's just insulting and bad for everyone.
Mm-hmm. It's dumb. It's dumb, and it's not the last time Ridley Scott will find himself at the Razzies, but perhaps one of the dumbest reasons here. Maybe this is why I feel like there was this blowback to her decision to do this role, because like that feels, to give her that award feels sexist. Might be too. I don't know if sexist, but it feels charged with a cultural sentiment that is like, I'm very unhappy at you, Demi Moore, for doing this to yourself.
Yes. Yes. It feels like someone is trying to punch back against something culturally happening that they didn't like, and it's not about her performance. It's about I don't, maybe they're reacting to what I said at the beginning of the show, where it's like, this is just so transparently a political screed that I'm gonna just say I'm gonna lash out at it, and the target that is gonna connect is gonna be Demi Moore's performance, which it's like, no, Demi Moore's performance was fine. That's not the problem.
Yeah, she did great. And just those of you at home know, the Navy opened up SEAL training for women in 2016, and our first real life G.I. Jane pass training in 2021. It's funny because if you read the article about it, it almost sounds like it's an article straight out of this movie, because it's like the soldier who the Navy refused to identify, like they wouldn't say who it was. I think they have since, but they wouldn't say who it was at first, which is funny. Good, because leave that woman alone. Like,
yeah, that's interesting. That is kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. So it only took 20 years after this movie said it happened, but it happened.
Progress.
Yeah, there you go. Anything else you want to talk about G.I. Jane? I think, like we said, overall, good movie. I wouldn't rush out and watch it. But if you're bored on a Saturday, seeing Demi Moore do push-ups a lot, worse ways of spending your afternoon.
Yeah, no, the movie definitely embodies the male gaze. I will say that.
That is very true.
It's quite a lot of male gaze for a feminist movie.
Extremely feminist movie. Definitely shot by a man.
Yeah, a man who understands how to get men interested in a movie about feminism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. We were tricked. Mm-hmm. By the end of the movie, we were like, yeah, I agree. Pro-feminism.
Yeah, more of this.
Oh, no, I've been tricked. Anything else, Matt?
Nope.
All right, so that is G.I. Jane film number 10. Probably going to sit in the middle of our ranking once we get there. But do you know what's next, Matt? Do you remember what comes after 1997?
I do know what's next.
What's next is probably the movie that saves Ridley Scott's career. Because like we said last week, this movie, G.I. Jane, made $48 million on a $50 million budget. So not quite as big of a bomb as White Squall, but that's not profit there either.
Right.
But the next film was very profitable, because Ridley Scott takes 3 years off and then comes back in the year 2000 with Gladiator. It's going to be a big one. This is the one we've been waiting for. Matt he's so excited. I am too. It's been a long time since I watched this movie, Matt. It's been a very long time.
Yeah, I'm champing at the bit here. I'm really excited to watch this again and talk about it.
Yeah. So that will be next week. We'll be talking all about Ridley Scott's Gladiator. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. Doof. All right, Matt, before we go, I want to have a conversation with you about Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe once again, because we don't talk about these guys enough. And if we don't talk about them, it'll just fade away and no one will ever know about it.
It's true. Yeah, Marvel is just very, very marginal these days.
So, I mean, the reason for this conversation is because Thor: The Dark World came out last weekend. Neither of us have seen Thor: The Dark World. Oh, no, sorry. Thor: Love and Thunder. Jesus. Yes. Thor: Love and Thunder came out last weekend, the fourth Thor movie. Neither of us have seen this film yet. We probably will. You maybe before me, because your kids, you can take your kids, I can't. It's not doing too great, and I think the thing I want to talk about here is not necessarily the business of Marvel, because they're doing fine financially, right? Like, even the movies that we didn't particularly like are performing very well financially. There's no problem there. I don't think this is going to be a conversation about how Kevin Feige should be losing sleep at night because he's starting to lose money. But what I am interested in is the creative and, successful telling of stories, which I do think largely Marvel has done a pretty good job of throughout the years. But it seems like we're in a bit of a rut. And to give some context to this, I wanted to talk to you about something I talked to you about earlier today, Matt, which is cinema score. You and I have talked about cinema score before, right? You know what that is.
I basically do. I mean, maybe we could briefly explain it for the listeners, though.
Yeah, so basically, it's a company that like waits outside of movie theaters. that makes it seem creepier than it is. No, they are ask permission from the theaters to go and wait outside theaters as movies get out, and do basically walking out of the theater, how did you like it type of polling of amongst moviegoers. They always do it opening weekend, and it's basically a ABCDEF or ABCDF. Maybe it's just ABCF. I don't know. It's a grade scale basically. What did you think of the movie? A, B, like it's very simple. And for the most part, cinema score averages are very, very high because, it's opening weekend and they're getting people walking out of the movie when they're most hype about it, right? So if you're going to see a movie on its opening weekend and you're walking out of the theater, you're probably into the movie, right? So most movies get high B's or A's. Like that's just what they do typically. Mm-hmm. So it's useful as a thing to compare against other movies, right? And in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 4 movies, and only 4 movies, have scored below an A- on a cinema score average. Those movies are weighted towards the present. So of the last 4 Marvel movies that have been released in theaters, 3 of them got B's or B pluses or something. So the only other one was Thor: The Dark World, the one that I kept saying at the beginning of this conversation. And then we have The Eternals, Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness, and now Thor: Love and Thunder are all movies that ended with a below an A cinema score. So the audience is not really feeling them as much. And so the question I have for you, Matt, is what do you think's happening here? Knowing, of course, that we have not seen the Thor movie yet.
Well, the Thor movie specifically, I've heard some stuff about how it's sort of taking the piss out of the whole concept of, Thor and superhero movies. I don't really know any details about this other than like that at least gives me some reference for why people might be reacting to it as like, this is not what I thought I was buying into, Mm-hmm. I think people had similar criticisms about Ragnarok, actually. There's a lot of people who think Thor Ragnarok, Thor 3 was like stupid and insulting and disrespects the character, I think is a phrase that I'd heard. And I personally think it's like a really fun movie. It's just like a fun adventure movie. Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to set aside the recent one since we haven't seen it anyway, and just say like, it does seem like they're trying different things and people are reacting badly to it. Now, that's not necessarily saying they're getting worse. I don't happen to have liked the Eternals, but the Eternals does represent them sort of trying something different, right? They kind of got an artiste director and chose a really weird sort of cast of characters, and it was an experiment in a variety of ways. And I think it ended up not being a great movie, but I don't know. It could have been good, right? So anyway, I don't want to necessarily penalize them for trying new things. I do think, setting all of that aside, there's also now this kind of, for a while there, it very much felt like everything was the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You'd have a Captain America movie, and Black Widow would show up and be an important part of it. You'd have, you know, a s- you know, Doctor Strange shows up in Spider-Man. That was recent, actually. But like the idea that this was like a universe where you kind of felt comfortable and you kind of felt that there was this consistency. There are pros and cons to that, but I think they've lost a lot of that recently. And I don't have I don't even necessarily want to say like, and that's a mistake. It's just I observed that has happened, and seems to be one of the many things that has changed recently. I'll stop rambling now. What do you think?
I'm going to attempt to construct a rather elaborate metaphor here, so bear with me.
Please.
So in, TV, there are television shows that are basically centered around high school, right? Teen high school TV dramas, like think of your Dawson's Creek, your OC, like, and more modern examples that I don't know because I don't watch those shows anymore. But the one thing that I think all these shows have in common is how they deal with the show if it decides to go on beyond the children graduating from high school. Because the show was built around the conceit of these are high school students going to high school. This is what the show is. They graduate. What do we do next? And a lot of the shows of this example falter a lot when trying to figure out what the hell the show is now going to become now that we're not in high school anymore. Like the OC is a great example of this, a show that just couldn't figure out what it wanted to be after high school, and it just couldn't figure it out, and it collapsed. And there's shows that kind of wander around for a bit and get into college, and they use like the metaphor of a college student trying to discover who they are to become like a metaphor for the show itself, trying to like figure out what it is in this new world. I think the MCU is going through that right now. I think that everything leading up until the end of the Infinity Stone stuff was the MCU's high school, where this is kind of not necessarily all built to lead up to this from the beginning, but like on some level, this was the plan. On some, even like in just like a very loose outline way, everything was like centered around building up to this one moment. And we did that. And okay, we graduated and now we're in college and I don't know what we're going to do anymore. And so they're just trying a lot of different things, and those things, aren't successful. I agree with you that I think The Eternals is a movie that, like, I would love to see them try to take more swings like that. They struck out with that one. I don't think it was a very good movie, but like, I respect them for trying. And I think that's kind of what we're at. We're kind of struggling to figure out where we are, because this is the sixth movie. This is the sixth movie in Phase 4. Like, for reference, the sixth movie in Phase 1 was The Avengers. Mm-hmm. It was the big culminating team up movie. We don't even have a shape of like what a culmination of this current universe is even going to be, or even if they want to do a culmination. Like, I mean, there's a lot of multiverse stuff happening, so it seems like it's going to do like maybe a Secret Wars type thing. But like, if so, that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get to that. And I think like a lot of the viewers are still in kind of a come down from what Endgame was, mm-hmm. and what these movies are not making them feel. And I think, Spider-Man No Way Home kind of got to cheat in that, because they got to be a culmination of a bunch of movies that people weren't even thinking about anymore. So they kind of got to cheat. And none of their movies have that ability to do that. And so I don't know. It's like, I don't think Shang-Chi was a bad movie. I thought it was just fine. I finally did see Doctor Strange, and I loved the Sam Raimi parts, and I really did not like the entire rest of it. And I don't know. It's just, when you're in college, you're just going to experiment a lot and make some choices, and it's not all going to work out, right? And I just think that's where we are right now in the MCU.
Yeah, I do like your metaphor. I mean, the idea that we kind of ended something, and now we're moving on to something new, and it's not really clicking. Mm-hmm. I mean, just I think it's even worse than that, though, because it's not. It would be one thing if we were taking, Steve Rogers and Iron Man and saying, well, what are they going to get up to now? Because they're gone. They're not going to get up to anything else, and now there's no real replacement for them. There's no. I'm not saying we need like a 1-to-1 replacement for those two characters, but we need. Who is the main character of phase whatever
who's
we're
on the
doing?
Avengers right now?
Yeah, who are yeah, right. Like who am I mean that's the thing. I think I like Shang-Chi and Doctor Strange more than you did, but I still don't really feel like I'm not nearly as attached to them as I was to Tony Stark or whatever. And it's like, okay, we had like 5 movies to get attached. We had like 7 or 9 movies to get attached to him. I'm like, yeah, I know. But like you said, we're already 6 movies in and I'm attached to nobody. Maybe the closest thing to being attached I am is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And then in second place, Doctor Strange, because he has been around for a long time, but he just has this like aloofness that doesn't endear you to him in the way that, I mean, I think that like the number one quality that endears you to Iron Man and Captain America is just like they're the guys who are going to like take the punch to the face and save the day, and Doctor Strange kind of never ends up being that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, the other part of this we haven't really talked about yet is the TV part of it, where, Marvel has so invested in these TV shows that are, I think, supposed to be in many ways setting up or carrying on whatever, if there is a big team up thing, I think they're going to be instrumental to it. Obviously Loki, like for sure, right? Introduced what could be one of the big bads of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other problem is that those TV shows, at least in my opinion, have been largely unsuccessful. There's some examples of good stuff. Like we talked about WandaVision. I really liked most of that show. Miss Marvel just wrapped up this week. Its 6-episode run. I cooled on the show the longer it went on, as seems to happen with these Marvel shows. But I do largely think that was a good show. I think I think it ended well. But I don't know. They're just in such a weird place right now, and I don't know where they go. I mean, because right now we're on like the cusp of, we have also the Fantastic Four and all of the X-Men now. So I guess, what do you think of this idea that like when they were doing all the planning for Phase 4, they weren't 100% sure if the Fox deal was going to go in or not, so they kind of had to just play defense and like play prevent for a while and just like kick the ball around and not advance anything too far because they didn't know what toys they're going to have in their toy box or not yet. I mean, could that be possible?
Sure. I mean, it has kind of felt like treading water. I mean, you could be right. We're both saying, it doesn't feel like we've gone anywhere yet. It really feels like we've seen a bunch of independent movies, some of which were actually not great at all. And maybe, part of it is they've been intentionally avoiding kind of committing to the direction they were going to go. Because if they're going to bring mutants into this, man, like, shoot, first of all, they should have already started warming us up to that idea, because that's like such a huge change. The only way I could even see that working is if they basically make it a multiverse thing where it's like, well, this is another universe where there are mutants or something like that.
Well, there was a show. I don't want to spoil it, but there was a show that ended this week that officially introduced the idea of mutants to the MCU.
See, okay, well, I don't know. I guess I'll have to watch that show. I mean, God.
I'll tell you how it was done after. I don't want to spoil it for people because it just came out and people might not have watched it yet. But I'll tell you how it was done.
Okay.
After the show, you don't need to watch the show just for that moment. I think you should watch the show because it's a good show.
Okay.
But
now I'm annoyed though at even just the knowledge that the way they chose to introduce mutants to the MCU was in one of the TV shows rather than a movie, because we talked about this as like one of the risks of like, hey, are we gonna start feeling like we're not in on a joke if we don't watch all of the TV shows? And
Well,
it's beginning to sound like the answer is yes.
I think the problem actually is Marvel is very savvy and they're aware of that. So what it's going to do is if you watch a TV show, you get much more, backstory and flavor to the stuff, but the movies are still going to have to pause and explain shit to you that if you watch the show, you might already know. Like, again, we haven't seen Thor: Love and Thunder, but my understanding of that movie is that there are several times throughout the movie where the movie just kind of pauses and tries to catch you up on shit that you might have missed. And I know for a fact that Doctor Strange did that too several times. Did you watch WandaVision? Well, you really should watch WandaVision, but just in case you haven't, here's a Cliff Notes version of what happened to Wanda Maximoff, which is entirely necessary for you to understand what her character is doing in this movie. Look, this is why I hate comic books, right? I hate comic books because it is impossible to keep up with the plot lines. You can't do it. There's too much going on, and it just becomes exhausting, where I just want to go into a movie theater and see a movie. And what's fascinating about this is we're talking about how these movies, so far it feels like they're really not building to anything. So they're just one-offs, which in theory is exactly what I would want, but they're all one-offs that require something else. Like they're still building from something. It just doesn't feel like they're building to anything. Like, I don't understand how you watch Doctor Strange having not seen WandaVision. I really don't. I like, obviously maybe it's functional without it, but like it just loses the entire flavor of who she is and what happened to her in that story. And so I'm incredibly frustrated at times, just like you are, with the idea that like Miss Marvel is going to show up again in the next Captain Marvel film. And is she going to show up in the Captain Marvel film as a fully fleshed out character that we all should already know? Or are we going to play catch up on who Kamala Khan is for 20 minutes in the middle of this movie? And I kind of think it's going to be the latter.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I think both of them suck. Like, I think both of those options suck. Telling your audience you have to watch a TV show sucks. But also telling the audience that did watch the TV show, here's 20 minutes into our movie we're going to spend just refreshing you on who this person is, also kind of sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, your reminder that this all came from comic books reminded me of something I may have told you about at some point, which is when I was in high school, me and my friend bought this comic book. It was either called Forge or Cross Gen or something. It doesn't matter. It's confusing. I tried to look it up, and it's like confusing branding. And like the first issue was like really interesting and beautiful and thick and very artistic, and we really liked it. And then like the second issue was a little bit thinner. Like maybe it was like 2 stories instead of 3, and then like by the 4th issue it was like a scant few pages, cost the same amount as the first book that had been like literally 5 times as long, if not more. And this is my fear of like what, like they hook you and then they degrade the quality of the product while charging more. Because that's just good business, right? That's why comic books keep going ad nauseum is because it's like, well, this is the business model. What do you want us to do? Just end the story? Just have there be no more Punisher comic books? Mm-hmm. Because it's like, of course not. And I feel like that's the problem that we've moved into this domain where Marvel's business model is basically create this massive web of interconnected things where we're kind of squeezing you for money from all directions, funneling you into our maw of money extraction, and it really loses the what you just described. It loses the ability for like a relatively median person to like keep track of it or really engage with it the way for example, I think a lot of people saw all of the Phase 1 movies,
Mhm.
100% of them. How many people have seen all of the TV shows and all of the new movies?
Probably not many.
Some number, not nearly as many.
Yeah.
And that's going to continue to be the case. Like, I don't think they're going to reverse this trend. Is I guess what I'm saying, because this is now the business model.
Yeah. That sucks. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I really want to love these movies. I loved so many of the previous movies, and I like so much of this stuff. But yeah, it's becoming like, I don't know. It's like, sometimes I feel like everyone just got like swept up in the moment of how like great and cool it was that this was all leading to Endgame, and then like this is all of our like hangover from it, where we're just like, oh, huh, this is all kind of silly, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't actually care about any of this stuff. I don't know. I'm in this really weird place where, like, if you had asked me, 3 years ago what I would think about the MCU, I'd be totally jazzed about it. And like, I think there's supposed to be a Black Panther movie coming out this year still somehow. I don't know how they're handling Chadwick Boseman's death in it. I don't know. I'm not like super jazzed and excited about that movie at all.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there have been a lot of people leaving the production, which is usually a bad sign.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that seems like a red flag. Like I haven't heard any good news, and I've heard about a lot of people leaving the production. Put it that way. So
yeah. So I don't know. I it's not that I think like Marvel's in trouble. I think they're going to just keep doing what they're doing. But it's like, I guess the question I have for you is there ever a point in this whole thing where you just like walk out there and be like, time out, reset. It's all, I'm wiping it all away. Cause the comics have done that in the past. I don't think Marvel has, but I know DC has kind of just been like, okay, we're resetting. It's too much. It's gotten too confusing. I know Marvel like will add artificial resets, right? Where a big event will happen and it doesn't reset all of continuity. They're not starting from one, but they like move characters away from each other and back into a starting position and stuff like that.
Maybe. I mean, when you do something as dramatic as a multiversal war, I think you have the potential to, you could do something as dramatic as the way Infinity War ended, where it ends on a massive downer, and then you have like a big kind of resetting of where I actually think the end of Phase 1 was a success in that regard. It had such a disruptive event that you could really believe that we're kind of giving birth to a whole new generation of characters and situations. What they go from here, I mean, I don't know. I think I basically have faith in the creative minds behind the storytelling. I think maybe they have made this thing into an unwieldy Frankenstein's monster, which might be out of their ability to control. I'm not sure they could still stick the landing. I'm just not sure anymore.
I don't even know what a landing looks like anymore. Like, should we want them to do a big culminating team up type movie? Like should we want there to be more Avengers movies? Is that's what's, I don't know. Man, my biggest problem is I don't know if I care anymore.
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm struggling with the most right now, is I just don't know if I care anymore. And should I care? Should I care about this anymore? I don't know. Like, maybe in a few years with my kids into it, I'll care more, but
yeah. I think you should care if and only if it's worth caring about. I mean, I think that my love of the Phase 1 was like authentic. I wasn't like a fan who was like giving the movies credit for trying. I just liked them. I thought they were good. And I haven't particularly liked, I don't want to be too unfair and retcon. Like I have liked a lot about the new stuff. I've just also felt this tension and this like broadening and lack of focus as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think it's also how much of the shows have been a disappointment to me. I think I'm carrying into my attitude towards the films as well.
Yeah, right. I mean, I agree. I think that my affection for the whole shared universe has been kind of diluted by a lot of the more negative. I actually, that's a great point. I'm reflecting on why I'm feeling confused right now, and I'm realizing like, oh, I've mostly liked the movies, and I've mostly ended up pretty disappointed by the shows. And on net, that actually leaves me with a feeling of disappointment, which seems important.
Yeah, I don't know. Then they were gonna cast Wolverine, and you'll be back in again.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, probably. I am dumb, so yeah, probably.
How are they gonna do this? I just don't know how any of this is gonna work.
Man, the idea of Wolverine being a part of my life for like ever. I don't know how I feel about that. That feels like recasting Luke Skywalker or something.
I think the thing that I'm getting the most bummed about is that it's just things aren't going to end anymore.
Uh-huh.
Like nothing's going to ever end anymore. Like, we were talking about Stranger Things last week a little bit. And they've announced that Stranger Things is entering its final season next year, which hooray, it's going to end. And then of course, in the same beat that they announced that, and the Duffer Brothers have signed like an infinity movie deal with Netflix. And one of their first projects will be a Stranger Things spinoff. And I'm just like, fucking kill me. Like, I want things to end. I think it's important that great things that we love end, and we don't continue making them forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't argue with that.
Some of my favorite movies are just one-off movies that they made no more sequels to. They were great.
I think all of my favorite movies are one-off movies that they didn't make any sequels to. The only exception I can think of is like Back to the Future. Okay, I'm lying. That's not true at all. A lot of my favorite movies are like Star Wars movies, but but a lot of my, I would say most of my favorite movies are one-off movies. Yes, I think this is accurate.
Everyone should go see Elvis, which is a one-off movie that definitely ends because Elvis is dead. Not a perfect movie. Movie with a lot of problems, but
are you sure Elvis is dead? Because a lot of people have questions about that. I can very much believe they'd make a sequel where he doesn't die.
Nah, Elvis is dead. Elvis died almost 40 years ago.
But I mean, you're aware that it's like a cult, like conspiracy theory that people.
Yeah, but that was literally because like stories about Elvis stopped selling, and so tabloids just started making up stories about how Elvis is alive,
right,
to sell more Elvis shit.
I'm not saying I think Elvis is alive. I'm saying you could imagine them making an Elvis expanded universe on the back of people believing that Elvis is still alive and he went on and he has the whole secret life and maybe he's an alien.
Well, I mean, that's what Men in Black said.
That it is. That's what I've always believed.
Go see Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. I want to end this. I want to end this movie this episode on a positive note, because I think we were pretty down on G.I. Jane and we're pretty down on the MCU as a whole. But there's a lot of wonderful movies out there. One of which we'll be talking about next week, Ridley Scott's Gladiator. But also, go see Elvis. It's a fun time. Not the best movie in the world, but like, if you like Baz Luhrmann, you'll love Elvis. What other great movies should people go see? Matt?
I liked Lightyear a lot, so go see Lightyear.
Yeah, well, you talked about that last week. That's cheating.
Yeah, well, still, you can still go see it.
You can still go see it.
They keep the movies in the theaters for more than 1 week now, I heard.
Top Gun Maverick is still rolling in the theaters. Paramount's going to let that thing live there because people keep going seeing it.
That's pretty funny. That's great. Good for them.
All right, I think that's going to do it for us this week. As we said, next week we'll be doing Ridley Scott's Gladiator. But if you want to talk to us about the stuff we talked about this week, that is G.I. Jane or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What did you think of Thor: Love and Thunder if you out there went and saw it? Do you agree with the people that it's not that good, or did you love the hell out of it? Please let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, on Twitter at doofmedia, or of course over at our Reddit account. That's r/doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia, where you can each month nominate a film that is good that we will enjoy talking about.
That's right.
We were just so negative this week. I don't like that. I don't like it.
It's been I'm not gonna lie. There's been a lot of these Ridley Scott movies we haven't loved, but I think we're gonna enter into a new phase. Phase 2. Right. Ridley Scott, see you. Phase 2.
I hate you. I hate you so much.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on the Apple Podcast app. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
I'm so glad you said app after that, because I thought you were just going to call it and go to the Apple Podcast.
The Apple Podcast.
All right, folks. We'll see you next week for, no spoilers, but I think it's going to be a little bit more positive of an episode as we continue deconstructing Scott with his smash hit Gladiator. We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.